a lot of companies are getting it very wrong because they are bringing all these AI tools in and adding them on top of a system that is already inefficient. Talk 25% less on calls. We could all perhaps do with being a little bit more concise sometimes. Something I certainly try and think about more is speaking less, listening a bit more. Because often, especially if you're trying to read from a script, it can be very easy to get a bit carried away and you end up talking over the person, or you don't actually hear their problems because all you're doing is focusing on what you're saying. Nobody cares what color your product is. That sounds obvious, but actually it's not. It's so easy when you are in a sales conversation and you are reading off the script. You do have this prospect in front of you, whether it's in person or on a screen. All they care about is how big their bonus is going to be so that they can take their kids on holiday. Focus on how you can solve that for them. Welcome to Drive to Thrive, a Pitstop podcast. My name is Sandy and I am your host. And this week, it's just me. We have reached episode 60, and regular listeners will know every 10th episode is a solo episode. So it is just me going through the top 5 lessons from the previous 10. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. And regular listeners may have noticed that there has been a little bit of a pivot in terms of the guests we're getting on. So as Pitstop as a company has pivoted and changed and gone into the sort of sales industry, the sales realm, which is big enough in itself. Every business needs sales. Every business needs to make money, and sales is often the tip of the spear for that. So Pitstop as a company pivoted, and now we're offering a solution for helping sales teams, gain the feedback and the coaching that they need. And that's been reflected in the guests that we've had on the podcast. So we've still getting amazing coaches, consultants, people that are giving the advice that we all need to hear, but specifically within that sales realm. And for me, it's been really exciting because I've kind of pivoted with Pitstop. Sales isn't necessarily an industry I've been in before. And I feel like I've just had a masterclass getting to have these conversations with these amazing people. So I hope those of you listening have also felt that as well, and maybe have gained some advice and are able to bring that into your business or your career or whatever it is that you're doing. And we've certainly had some amazing messages and comments and things on LinkedIn about the episodes that we've been doing. And, the guests themselves often all actually know each other. So it's really nice to feel like we're slotting into this kind of network within the sales industry. So without further ado, first up, the first of the top 5 lessons from the previous 10 episodes comes from episode 55, which was Hannah Ajikawa, the importance of human connection in sales. And that's kind of the lesson, to be honest. The main thing I wanted to focus on, or that resonated with me, was the importance of being authentic when you're doing your sales calls. So if you can't be yourself, and if you can't find a bit of time to put yourself across, and I guess, let the person in a little bit to who you are, but also find out who they are as well, it's very difficult for you to then be able to articulate yourself effectively and essentially sell to them. You need to find some common ground with them. And in order to do that, you have to let yourself shine through. Don't be afraid of saying what you had for breakfast that morning or what you're struggling with at the moment. Of course, there's a certain element of, towing that line and making sure you're not making it too personal. At the end of the day, it's still a work call. But what Hannah said is, it's so important to be authentically yourself and let yourself bleed through into that. And for me, like I said, I'm fairly new to this sales industry, and talking to these people has been amazing. And actually, it's something I've also taken into the podcast as well, is recognizing that I'm allowed to let my own personality come through a little bit. And actually, when I do that, and I do kind of sit back and relax into it a bit more, rather than feeling like I've got my notes and my script essentially, and that I've got to go through, I've often found it's become a better episode because I've sailed into myself a bit more. And that means I can let the guest speak without me feeling like I need to kind of steer the conversation where I feel like it needs to go. And then my responses as well, I'm allowed to draw on my own knowledge and my own experience in life. And it was really cool to hear that that's the same in something as can be seen as corporate as sales. And Hannah, who is someone at the top of her game, for her to come in and say, no, let your personality bleed through. Let your authenticity, be yourself, and you'll find actually you'll be selling more and being more successful. Of course, stick to the script. But yeah, don't feel like you can't sort of pad it out a little bit with a bit more of a personal discussion. So that was a really cool lesson. from Hannah Ajikawa. So that was episode 55. So yeah, if that resonates with you, if that's something that perhaps you feel like you could bring more into your sales conversations or just daily life, go and listen to the full episode with Hannah, because that was quite a big theme of the episode. Next up, I'm being naughty here. The next two are from the same episode, but they're quite different. And that is episode 56, which is with Richard Blundell. Richard is an author. He wrote a book all about kind of GTM, the B2B handbook, the go-to-market for SaaS businesses. It's got a very long title. Sorry, Richard. But our founder, Emmett, he read it over, I think it was over Christmas and New Year. He read Richard's book and was like, this has become my Bible. And he really, really enjoyed it. So we reached out to Richard, and straight away, Richard was like, yeah, I'd love to kind of come on the podcast. And what followed was that for me, the masterclass within all the masterclasses. Don't get me wrong, I love every episode I do, but this one really stood out. And for me, I really learned a lot from this one. And the first thing that he spoke about, and this is actually, he's got another book coming up. We're going to be doing a webinar with him as well. So, keep an eye out for that on our LinkedIn. And it's going to be all about his new book and that. And the big theme behind his new book is this idea of, he talked about this analogy of having a virtual theater. And what you want to do as a salesperson, if you're building a go-to-market strategy, building a pipeline, is nail that ICP and fill that virtual theater with those people. So imagine you've got 500 seats and you want to fill it with those people, and make sure that what you're saying is as relevant as possible to your ICP, to your ideal customer profile, the person that you actually want to be talking to. What does that person look like, and are they sat right in front of you, and what are you going to be saying to them? So it's so important to know that it's going out to that right people, and you've got to kind of almost, I think it was him that said it. Someone said the other day, maybe it was Richard Harris, that they don't like the idea of this concept of reverse engineering. And I brought it up and said that you kind of trying to reverse engineer it. And I think that is, but I think he had a better term for it. But the idea of reverse engineering it and taking it back and going, actually, who is this person? What do they want to hear from me? What are they kind of struggling with? And if you could almost build that analogy, because often, especially with, digital, and like I'm literally looking at a screen, I'm looking at myself as we record this. It can be so difficult to think of the actual person that you're trying to sell to. Who is that person? And it's so easy to put it together online and all this. But by having this analogy and this idea of like, they are actually sat right in front of me. What do they actually look like? And what are they struggling with? What do they need from me? And how can I offer it to them in a way that they're going to resonate and want to buy from me ultimately? And by trying to actually have them sat in front of you and thinking about that and having that in your mind, I think it makes it all the clearer. And that leads really nicely into the next one from Richard Blundell, which is, this one was good. This one really resonated because yeah, this one was good from Richard Blundell. Again, I know, I'm sorry, but this one was amazing. And then Richard Blundell again. I know, very naughty, but fuck's sake, what's wrong with me? And that leads really nicely into the next one, which again is Richard Blundell. And that is that nobody cares what color your product is. And that sounds obvious, but actually it's not. It's so easy when you are in a sales conversation and you are reading off the script and you do have this prospect in front of you, whether it's in person or on a screen. It's so easy to just go to the default and just talk about the actual product that you've got and give them a run through of it. And you'll see we've got this graphic design and we've got this really great little widget here and all this. People just don't care. Even half of your AEs and SDRs and stuff don't care either. And they work for the company. All they care about is how big their bonus is going to be so that they can take their kids on holiday, or so that they can paint the spare bedroom, or so that they can pay off a bit more of the mortgage or buy a bit more Bitcoin or whatever they want to do. They want an easier life and they want to make more money. So for you as a salesperson on the other side of that, focus on how you can solve that for them. What is the nail in their foot So as a salesperson looking at the prospect, right, this is the nail in your foot. I'm going to pull it out for you. As Richard said, the best salespeople in the world are doctors and dentists, because whatever they prescribe and tell you that you need, you're sold on it. Yep, fine. I'll take it because I have to, because it solves the problem. If you go to the dentist, you're moaning about it. Oh, I've got to pay for it and it's so expensive. And you get a root canal, but then suddenly you're completely pain free and you're sat there and you can go out for a meal with your family and have a great time. You're like, a week later, you're like, I don't care how much money that cost because it's completely solved my problem. So as a salesperson, whatever you're trying to sell, think about that as well. It's not just the stone in their shoe, it's the nail in their foot. What is the actual problem that they are struggling with, and how can I solve that? And that's what needs to come through in conversations, in emails, in the pipeline that you're building. Think about how that can become your main source of messaging rather than just describing a product and talking about what it is. And this is something like I've taken into the marketing we're doing at Pitstop as well. You know, it's something that can go across all aspects of life. Whether you're just trying to have a conversation with someone, how can I make their life easier? How can I remove the nail from their foot? How can I be more of a dentist? Who knew a dentist would be so inspiring? But I think this is one of those pieces of advice that is so obvious and so simple that we completely forget to follow it. So this has really been the front and center for me when it comes to work, and certainly the advice that we've been giving out and the work we're doing with sales coaches, and the work we're doing at Pitstop as well is completely centered around this. How do we remove the nail from our ICP's foot? And I feel like those two ideas from Richard Blundell go really nicely together. So, the idea of building this virtual theater, nailing who that ICP is, what does that person look like? How do I put them in front of me in an effective way? And then going, right, what's the message that I'm going to put across them about how I'm going to solve their problem? You're a prospect, right? Okay, this is the problem you're having. Here's how I can solve it. Not, look how nice this product is. Have you seen the new colors that we've put on? Because it is so easy to do that. So those are my two lessons from Richard Blundell. I hope they're as effective for you as they have been for me. Next up, episode 58, and that was with Richard Harris. Richard. So his episode was all about the importance of systems in a sales team and how you can be more concise. So actually, kind of pushed back a little bit on what Hannah said, which I found really interesting, because actually during the episode with Richard, he did actually say he knows Hannah and has worked with Hannah a bit. So it was interesting. Actually, the lesson I took from him is immediately one of the most effective pieces of coaching advice he said he ever received in his career was he should talk 25% less on his calls. And he self-confessed to being someone who does talk a lot and does get into the weeds and detail-oriented and can get a bit carried away. So essentially, if you think that this is perhaps more pertinent to you than someone who maybe doesn't do that. But equally, we could all perhaps do with being a little bit more concise sometimes, myself included. And I literally talk on this podcast for a living. It's something I certainly try and think about more, is speaking less, listening a bit more. Because often, especially if you're trying to read from a script, it can be very easy to get a bit carried away and you end up talking over the person, or you don't actually hear their problems because all you're doing is focusing on what you're saying. And let's face it, sometimes just getting through the script so that you can measure the minutes. Right, yeah, I've done my sales calls. But actually talking a little bit less, listening a little bit more. And then that feeds back into Richard's idea. You don't need to just tell them what the product is. You don't need to fill that dead air. Let the prospect ask you a question. Let them come to you. Sit back, relax a little bit. Don't get caught up in just talking. Which is interesting, because on the other side of that, Hannah sort of said, you want to make sure that you're injecting a bit of your personality and a bit of authenticity in who you are. And often that, because of the time constraints of a 30-minute call, 45-minute discovery call, whatever it is, wherever you are in the pipeline, sometimes you don't feel like there's room for that because there's a lot of questions to ask and a lot of information to get through. So it's not black or white. There is gray within this. There are kind of gradients that you can do where you feel like, right, now I can inject a bit of personality, but also now is a good time for me to pull back a little bit and let them speak a bit more. Speak less, listen more, but also actually I can add my personality. And a lot of this, speaking from my podcasting background, a lot of this is just experience. Like if I went back and listened to my first podcast that I ever recorded, much like anyone listening within the sales industry, if you ever went back and listened to your first sales call versus where you are now, X amount of years down the line, you'd probably cringe and go, God, how did I even get to where I am now? It's not like anyone expects you to be, Jordan Belfort on day one, but just settling into your own kind of rhythm of communication can be really effective. And it's great to see two coaches at the top of their game over the last few episodes of the podcast giving different pieces of advice, which kind of just shows that there is no one perfect way to do it. You kind of have to find your own way, but there are kind of little guidelines that can be given. So that was my lesson from Richard Harris. He actually has this idea of being professional, so personal and professional, and that kind of backs up what Hannah was saying as well. Also, Richard does surfing and sales retreats in Costa Rica every November. And Emmett, founder, I know you're listening to this. We should go surfing in Costa Rica and talk to people about sales. That would be nice. And then finally, episode 59 with Mark Colgan. This was a really cool one. Mark's also very detail-orientated, system-orientated, has a huge amount of experience across the industry. And in every episode, something I haven't mentioned so far, every episode we always talk about AI. It's impossible to not talk about AI. Pitstop is literally an AI tool, so it's the cornerstone of our business. And sales industry especially is being infiltrated, whether you think that's good or bad, by AI tools. There's all this talk about AI SDRs, all these different ways of kind of streamlining the process. And, obviously there's a lot of fear with that of, is it going to cost people their jobs and livelihoods? And from what Mark said is a lot of companies are getting it very wrong because they are bringing all these AI tools in and adding them on top of a system that is already inefficient. So a lot of these tools are add-ons. They're additional things that might help make things a bit easier, but the actual skeleton of their system is not good. So often Mark said he'll be consulting and a company will come in and they'll go, right, what are these AI tools to make this quicker? How do we make the pipeline move faster? How do we increase, so we can increase our sales targets every month and every quarter? What is it we need to do? And Mark says the first thing he goes is, I need you to tell me exactly who your ICP is and exactly what that person looks like, what problems they're having, what could do. And he says very often the people that he's interacting with cannot do that. So he says, right, before we even talk about these magic tools that are supposedly going to help you generate way more revenue and save money and, live in utopia, we need to actually define all these other things that should have been part of the foundation first. And he said it was astounding how many organizations do not have that. So often it's very easy to chase the golden dragon and think that you need, all these exterior AI tools. But actually, you've got to make sure that you've got an effective system in place first before you start bringing in all these essentially extracurricular things. Now, don't get me wrong. Pitstop is not an example of this. There are other ones. Everyone needs this kind of coaching, feedback, guidance. That is part of a foundation. But it's so easy to see the big shiny, content thing or, a new calendar or something like that and think, right, that'll streamline and make everything easier. But it won't. And that's not me. I don't confess to be the expert, but I do get to have these conversations with the experts. And that's what they're saying. Don't feel like you have to jump on a trend. You need to build a system, find a foundation, build an operating system, get some feedback, coaching, performance, execution breakdown for your team so that you can start seeing the results that they're doing, the gaps that need to be filled, and how your team can move forward towards their goals quicker. And ultimately, that's done through a system, not through fancy tools that you can just throw on top of a stack that already kind of doesn't work. So that's it. That's the top 5 lessons from the previous 10. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you've taken something away from it. Like I said, this pivot into sales, it's just been an absolute masterclass for me. I love the fact that I've been interacting with a few friends recently who are in this industry, and I can immediately just have conversations with them about work. And I've actually been quite surprised at how literate I am already within this industry, having done 6 or 7 episodes with people about it. So yeah, if you haven't listened to the full episodes, please go back, give them a listen. I hope that they resonate and can help with you, whether you're progressing in your career or whether you're trying to coach others to progress. And then also, if you do know a sales coach or someone that you think we should get on the podcast, that we should be having conversations with, that potentially would be interested in Pitstop, please do reach out. Let us know. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Instagram. yeah, and drop us a message, and we can go from there. But yeah, thanks to all of you for listening, and we will see you all for the next one.